Hey, what's up, Nashville? I am Beau. Welcome back to the What You Need to Know podcast. We are very quickly going to get you caught up on the past few weeks of Nashville commercial real estate news. I will tell you that I do sense a uh, a change in the landscape here in Nashville. If you've been following the podcast for any period of time, you understand that 21 and 22, there was a lot of high priced land sold. There was some very high profile developments planned, and many of those projects have since stalled out. I think we're picking up some steam in the tail end of 2026 in that regard. Many of those higher profile developments are either getting started, getting financed, or some even coming online. So I do think 2026 is the end of what I'll call the pause. And I think, 2027 are brighter days ahead for some of those much bigger projects. I would argue that during that same time, when many of those larger ground up development projects stalled, all of the kind of mom and pop real estate still continued to transact at prices sellers could be very happy with. So I'm not arguing that the Nashville marketplace has been down for the last 4 years, but it's certainly been in a pause for those high profile developments in many regards. And I do think that is changing. I think 2026 is probably the end of the pause for those types of projects. So what we're going to talk about today is, many of those projects that are moving forward today. That's kind of the theme of the show. And we've got a lot to talk about. So let's get into it. Downtown Boutique Hotel makes its fall debut. The bomb-damaged First Avenue building, last home to a hostel, nears its rehab completion. This is the same concept found in Austin, Texas. So a proven concept from Austin, almost complete for a bomb-damaged First Avenue building. A fall opening is being eyed for a group travel-focused hotel, live music space, and restaurant bar business to operate from a downtown Nashville building, last housing a hostel. The concept being called In Cahoots, in being INN, like in as in a hotel, In Cahoots. The building, which has been undergoing a major rehab since, surprise, surprise, 2021, located at the intersection of Church Street and First Avenue North. In Cahoots targets groups involving weddings, bachelorette travel, church retreats, and corporate meetings. So a very interesting concept. The bar located at the property will be called Whiskey Cellar and operate below the space from which since closed sports bar Riverfront Tavern was located. The former Riverfront Tavern space will feature some In Cahoots hotel suites and events spaces. So the former ground level retail space being used for hotel suites and event spaces, but they're putting the basement to work with a concept called Whiskey Cellar. Of note, Whiskey Cellar will be accessed via First Avenue, one of the few such entrance orientations that segment off of that street. The In Cahoots will offer 17 suites, each with between 4 and 6 bedrooms. A rooftop bar with indoor stage and an outdoor stage are also planned. Another bar called Bar Mischief, an Art Deco era influenced speakeasy-esque bar. Geez, lot of dashes. That is a mouthful. Art Deco era influenced speakeasy-esque bar that will seat 70 patrons and feature a 1928 Buick vehicle as a decor anchor. Structure will eventually accommodate a dirty soda bar, mimicking an old school candy shop. So a lot going on there. 2 separate bars, an eventual old school candy shop / dirty soda bar. But most interesting is the concept itself, in my opinion. 17 suites, each with between 4 and 6 bedrooms, really accommodating what's better known as group travel. That project been ongoing since 2021 and is about to open its doors this fall. Giartana moving forward with Elliston Place projects. Local development company seeks start on both Rock Block Flats and its mixed-use 17-story tower. Giartana plans a mixed-use tower to replace the existing Elliston Place structure, which last housed Corner Bar, to include 17 floors, 356 apartment units, and ground-level retail and restaurant space. In addition, Giartana is eyeing a 5-story with 2 levels below grade, 578 space parking garage. A 2027 construction start is planned. In addition, Giartana plans to resume by year's end work on its Rock Block Flats mixed-use development, which has been on pause for about 5 years. Do the math. These are all the projects that stalled out. The Rock Block Flats effort will include a reinvention of a long-closed dive bar called the Gold Rush and a 7-story apartment building. Giartana developed multiple nearby sites with apartment buildings called Artemis Midtown, Infinity Midtown, and 1818 Church. He has also owned the Rock Block restaurant business, Elliston Place Soda Shop. Quote, "Our shared goal with Metro Planning was to retain the nostalgia of the Rock Block by preserving the original buildings while breathing new life into the neighborhood with apartments." So again, a lot going on in that story. I think the major takeaway here is a 5-year dormant project, a big dormant project, is now going to kick off. Next, Amazon Music lands a $7.7 million permit for the interior construction of its Nashville Yards office. $7.7 million for the interior build-out. In addition to its 2 towers, Amazon is spending millions building out a new music office and production space at Nashville Yards. They are building out a new office space in the CAA office building, 1 floor or approximately 31,000 square feet. So $7.7 million to build out 31,000 square feet, which includes 26,000 square feet of interior space as well as 5,000 square feet of an exterior deck. So really, $7.7 million to build out 26,000 square feet. The office will offer content and audio studios, lounges and a listening room, green rooms, a hair and makeup room, and a conference room. Amazon Music joins other arts and entertainment tenants in the CAA office building. Creative Artists Agency anchors the building with a 75,000 square foot lease, and other tenants in the space include La Acoustics, co-working space Ampersand Studios, and the Iconics Gym. Amazon.com leases more than 1 million square feet of office space in a pair of towers at the Nashville Yards development. The 2 towers, home to about 3,000 employees, anchor much of Amazon's retail operations division, spearheading the company's shipping, logistics, and distribution work. The company's first tower at Nashville Yards opened in 2021. Amazon paused work on its second tower in 2022, which we've been discussing, and it sat empty for nearly 3 years as the company reevaluated the design and layout of the space. Amazon began work on its second tower last year. So, Amazon immediately took a full tower, committed to a second tower, pushed pause on the second tower, started the second tower, and then leased an additional 31,000 square feet in an adjacent office building for its music-specific business. So Amazon just is not slowing down. Again, all of this kind of buys into the story or contributes to the story that we're kind of turning the corner and the pause is soon to be over. An office building is eyed for Buchanan Street. This is one of those that you probably maybe ask, why do we care about a little office building on Buchanan Street? Well, I think it's interesting because it is one of those corridors that is really hoping to get gentrified, has been attempting to get gentrified for a number of years. And these are the type of corridors that really got put on pause after the market shifted as well. I've done some business on Buchanan Street. I'm actively working to sell property on Jefferson Street. Both of those corridors are very comparable. Both of those corridors really stalled out after 2022. So to see a building popping off on one of those corridors, I think lends itself to the theme of today's show. The building will offer 15,460 square feet and some service parking at 1600 Buchanan Street. Don Harden Group owns the 0.43 acre property, having paid $1.3 million for it mid 2025. Founded in 2001, Don Harden Group currently operates its office nearby at 1800 14th Avenue North, which is just 2 blocks east of the property. Some locals refer to the stretch as Buchanan Arts District, which I would argue is an attempt at rebranding, right? You could, if you've been on Buchanan Street, the arts are somewhat confined to, painting the exterior of these properties with kind of creative murals. I think it's a stretch to call it an arts district. I think that's more aspirational, right? We're trying to gentrify the corridor, give it a new image, a new lease on life, give it some demand. So they've rebranded it the Buchanan Arts District, which I think is probably a great idea. It seems that some people are riding with that name. Others aren't, right? The locals are definitely pushing it. They're looking for their neighborhood to improve. They're looking for their properties to go up in value. They're looking for more demand to return, both from customers, but also from tenants, from buyers. So the Buchanan Arts District is an attempt at rebranding one of these long, kind of dormant and decaying corridors similar to Jefferson Street. So I appreciate everything that's being done here. A 15,000 square foot office building, of all things, on Buchanan Street, I think is an interesting idea. I wonder if they have users in mind. I wonder if this is multi-tenant. I wonder, how they got it financed if they don't have a tenant in hand. I wonder all those things. We'll have to wait to find out. Next, let's move outside of Davidson County to my home base, which is Williamson County, who's also got some very exciting things in the works. A mixed-use project is now planned for the Cool Springs Galleria Mall. Charleston-based Graystar has acquired 5.35 acre segment of the Cool Springs Galleria parking lot for $11 million. And if you want to envision where this is, if you know where Cain's is, it's on an outlot of the mall. Right next to Cain's is a big underutilized parking lot that's always empty. They've just turned that always empty parking lot into $11 million. The seller was CBL Properties, which also developed the site with the mall. They're the longtime owner. The buildings are going to offer apartment and retail spaces. The buildings will be constructed on underutilized parking lots of the mall sites. So it was previously announced that they were targeting for that site 600 apartment units in a 120 room hotel. My understanding is this is primarily going to be this is primarily going to be apartments over retail. We'll follow up on this story, but 5 acres of parking lots being turned into apartments and retail at the Cool Springs Galleria site, which I think is an awesome use of that space. It's a great location. I fully understand and support that effort. I think that's going to be a very, very successful project. And a lot of people sleep on the Cool Springs Galleria Mall. It's not as flashy, perhaps, as the Green Hills Mall, for example, but I personally like it much more. It's easy It's safe. It's quiet. There's no drama. It's just a better overall experience than someplace like the Green Hills Mall, which it doesn't even have like a food court to feed children at. It doesn't even have a place to sit down. If you ever been in the Green Hills Mall, try to eat and try to sit down and tell me how it goes. Y'all can have that. I'll go to Cool Springs Galleria. Let's keep moving. Work resumes on a stalled Germantown project. We've been talking about these projects that have been stalling out. New York City-based Alcova Capital assumes control of a 7-story building that will now offer for sale condos. Work has been jump-started on a Germantown residential building for which construction stalled in 2024, with the first units expected to deliver late fall. So they're going to kick that project in the butt if they're going to deliver some units that soon. New York City-based real estate investment firm Alcoa Capital controls the project, which was initiated 4 years ago by Philadelphia-based Greenpoint Construction. The 7-story under construction structure sits at 1231 2nd Avenue North, to be called Fulton Residences, 210 for-sale residences that will start at about $270,000. Building amenities and common spaces will include a coffee bar, a heated pool, and an outdoor sun deck, a fitness studio, a billiards lounge with banquet seating, a co-working space, and a media room. The resumption of work on the project comes after an inconsistent construction pace from Greenpoint since beginning in guess when? 2022. Alcova Capital owns more than 2,000 multifamily units across 18 projects in various stages of development. So again, another project that just couldn't get going, started in 2022, changes ownership, right? So the capital provider takes over the project and finishes it on behalf of the original developer. Again, former strip club site slated for a tower. If you read enough newspapers, you will be totally triggered by the words that they use over and over. And one of them is slated. Another one is eyed, right? Former strip club site slated or eyed for a tower. It's like, yo, can we run some of these subject lines through AI and just get a little bit more creative with the wording instead of using the same tired language over and over? I mean, do you have more to do during a week than write 1 or 2 articles? How is it possible that we can't use more interesting language to describe some of these projects? Everything is so basic and tired. If it wasn't for you all and bringing you some of these up-to-date stories, I would skip a lot of this reading because it's painful and basic. Anyway, a 16-story apartment building is, guess what, slated for the former home of Pure Gold's Crazy Horse. Minnesota-based Taurine Development Partners plans to bring 311 apartment units to the site. Grammy-winning producer and engineer Reed Shippen, who I know and have tried to sell property to, acquired the property from Nashville-based development firm the Mainland Companies for just $2.5 million in October of last year. Taurine hopes to acquire the property by the end of this year, right? So they've got it locked up, is what we'd say in commercial real estate terms. They have a legally binding contract on that property, but have not yet lined it all up to close. Mainland paid a collective $15.3 million in 2022 for multiple properties that included the lot and the building that used to house the strip club. Mainland still owns a portion of the property, having previously eyed it, right? We're talking about these stupid words, eyed it for a 20-story tower. So, they paid $15.3 million and they sold off a very important chunk of it for just $2.5 million, which speaks to the difficulty getting these projects done through the pause. But it seems to me that Reed stepped in, did a deal that I'm sure was hard to finance, It was hard to get the money to buy that land, figured it out, and now is going to flip it for a profit to a developer who thinks they can get it done. So that's what I'm saying. If you're one of these guys that's been on the sidelines for a long time, if you can go in and buy land at a price below what you perceive its market value to be, I do think the timing is right to start thinking that through again, because I do think we're going to boomerang into 2027 and a lot of these stall projects are going to pop off. Do with that information with what you wish. Tower pitched. Forget this. Long stalled. West End site. A 15-story hotel and residential tower is proposed for the prime West End property formerly known to home a Piggly Wiggly. H.G. Hill has owned the property at 2900 West End Avenue for more than a century, which is crazy. A new building permit was issued for the site this month. Proposed plans include a 15-story building with 110 residential units, 260 hotel rooms, 10,000 square feet of restaurant space, and 20,000 square feet of retail space. So a long stalled West End site about to pop off with a new 15-story development. Next, trio of buildings to transform WeHo site. The owners of the iconic United Record Pressing site in Wedgwood, Houston, are orchestrating plans for a large mixed-use development to surround the historic building, to include a boutique hotel, office, and residential space. A 14-story hotel is the largest of the planned buildings. Get this, slated to rise at the corner of Chestnut and Martin Streets. The hotel is planned to include 175 rooms, a rooftop terrace, and retail space. On the other side of the United Record Pressing building is a planned 6-story office building that will span around 60,000 square feet. The third building is slated to offer condos and retail space and will rise 9 stories tall. United Record Pressing has owned the 2 parcels since 2001. So West End, Wedgwood, Houston, continuing to crank, or getting back to cranking, I guess one may say. I've got 2 more stories for you today. We're keeping a quick pace today, so you're welcome for that. I'm sure you've got other things to do. Trophy office rents surge in Nashville. Rent for Nashville's top-tier office space continues to climb, with prices now surpassing some of our big competitors. Nashville's average trophy office rent has reached over $60 per square foot all in, right? That figure is the average full-service rent rate, meaning it is an all-inclusive rate that covers all operating costs. So not, operating costs mean if you signed a triple net lease, you'd be paying base rent, you'd be paying prorated real estate taxes, you'd be paying prorated insurance, and you'd be paying prorated maintenance charges. Those are the triple net. Those are the 3 N's, right? Over the last 10 years, we've seen roughly 50% rent growth in the trophy product class. Properties that were delivered in 2015 and 2016, those were in the high 30s, or around 40 full service gross in terms of their asking rates. Now we're above 60. We've surpassed that of Atlanta and Raleigh. Nashville is still a huge discount to markets like New York City, San Francisco, and LA, which is crazy that you would pay more to occupy office space in any of those markets, which are all have such negative headwinds. And we're even still at a discount to Miami, Austin, and Dallas. So that I can understand, right? Miami, Austin, and Dallas, those are real competitors. San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles, those boys are on a downward slide, and that is not going to stop anytime soon. So I'm offended that people would pay more to be in those markets, but I'm not offended they'd pay more to be in Miami, Austin, Dallas. That's positive because we compete with those cities for corporate relocations, right? So the spin is Miami, Austin, and Dallas are all more expensive than Nashville, so why not come to Nashville? New high-profile developments like downtown's Nashville Yards, Germantown's Newhoff District, and AJ Capitals Wedgwood Houston projects have commanded the highest office rent prices in Nashville history. So those are record-setting developments. And lastly, let's go back to my home base, Williamson County, for what I believe is going to be a truly great project, a hotel planned for the factory at Franklin to be named the Factory Hotel. Again, right on the nose. I like it. We'll have 120 rooms, joining Marriott Bonvoy portfolio of brands as a tribute portfolio property. The factory at Franklin's Building 10 will house the hotel's main lobby, and Building 9 will be imagined for a pool courtyard. So what they're doing is they're taking two existing buildings that are kind of on the edge of the factory at Franklin. They're underused. They've always struggled, and they're repurposing those into a hotel. So there's a little standalone building. It's been a lot of things over the years. If you've ever gone to the farmer's market at the factory, you'd recognize it. It's a very interesting little building. That will be the building lobby. And then there's a more traditional industrial building in back that's kind of on the fringe, that's never really housed anything, that is going to become their pool. So again, I think those are very creative uses. The factory hotel will have a restaurant and a bar, a private dining room, event and meeting space, and a fitness center. The factory hotel is expected to break ground late this year, with an opening set for spring of 2028. A new parking garage will bring the total number of parking spaces at the factory to 1,100. And if you've ever heard me talk about the factory, they paid some real money to buy the factory, and they're paying real money to change the factory. You know, that is just one of those places that's got an energy about it that makes you feel good to be there. It is a destination. It's very unique. There's all kinds of different food options now. It is just a very, very cool property. You know, it works for old folks. It works for teenagers. It works for families. It works for folks that are just going to have a drink. You know, there's a little something for everyone at the factory. So I think the future is very bright there. They've really just kind of scratched the surface of what's possible, but they're doing so in a kind of very systematic, methodical way. You know, these guys are heavy hitters. They've done it before, and they're going to do it again at the factory. So if you haven't visited the factory lately, I encourage you to check it out. It's just one of those places that, at least for me, just kind of good for the soul, you know. I don't even know if they still do the farmer's market there or not. I think they kicked the farmer's market out, but I'm not exactly sure. I'll get back to you on that. But the farmer's market at the factory was also a mainstay for families in Franklin, something to do, to get out, to see and be seen, and just to kind of enjoy nature and that historic property. So if the farmer's market is gone, that's kind of the end of an era, but on to bigger and better. So those guys are all of the stories that we had to present today. Again, as I've mentioned, the theme of the show was to, you know, reinforce this idea that the pause is over, right? Let's get back to the booming development cycles of 2021 and then less so in 22, before everything kind of stalled. Let's get back to lending money to developers. Let's get back to putting shovels in the ground. Let's get back to doing business in the Nashville commercial real estate market for those big projects. As I said, the smaller ones, the mom and pop deals, they never stopped. You know, that's really the business that I'm in, representing owners of commercial properties, generally valued between $1 and $5 million. I would say that's the mom and pop space. And that market has been strong throughout. But those big projects that have multiple levels of capital required to get them done, man, some of them got done over the last 4 or 5 years. A lot of them are still waiting to get done. And those guys that have been sitting on that very expensive land, most probably used some debt service to acquire the land, have been servicing that debt for the last 4 years, been in a huge negative cash flow situation. Let's hope that all those guys can survive a little bit longer, because I do think next year these projects are going to roll, even if it's the original developer isn't the guy doing it. Maybe he flips the land, flips the development plan, flips the entitlements, flips it all to someone that's positioned to act and gets his money back and maybe a little bit extra. That's what I'm hoping. I don't want to see a lot of these projects really being sold for losses. I hope these guys can hold on just a little bit longer so we can make some deals happen. So thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast. Once again, I am Beau Beach. I am a commercial real estate broker who specializes in listing and selling commercial properties in Metro Nashville and the Southeast. If there's anything we can ever do for you in your commercial real estate needs, I encourage you to reach out, and I sincerely will do my best to help. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you all again soon.